Hello, everyone. Good evening. Please, if you can hear me, kindly confirm. Well, the class has not started. We would start at 5 on the dot. I'm just engaging us now to preempt us of the class. Everyone should please tell their colleagues to join. Class start officially by 5 p.m. So I want to welcome everyone for joining today's class. Apologies, yesterday's class couldn't hold because our facilitator had something to attend to at that time, and which could not allow her to join. So we'll continue with the class today, and I believe that very class will be much rescheduled much later. All right, thank you so much, everyone, and let's keep logged in till 5 on the dot, where we'll open the class officially. While we are doing that, let's invite our colleagues across all the parties to join. It's very important, please, so that we can have a full class and go ahead today. Thank you. Hello again. This is a reminder to please encourage all our colleagues to join. I think the number of participants rather is still very low compared to what we used to have, especially at this time. So I believe and I'm very sure that a lot of people will still join, but let's start giving them the heads up now so that we can have the maximum number we are supposed to have or the needed number we're supposed to have, and no one will have to miss out on any part of the conversation. Please and please, let's do well to encourage our colleagues. The participation level is still low. By 5 on the dot, we'll be reading the citation of our facilitator for today. So we don't want to miss out. We don't want anyone to miss out on any part of the conversation. Our party leaders should please reach out to their party members, and every one of us can also try to encourage our colleagues, because this is exactly why we sign up for the Electoral College, to be trained, to learn. So one of the best things to do is to ensure that we actively participating in classes, learning, ensuring that we are not missing out on very important classes, especially the ones we'll be having for today, which is political parties and structure. Rest assured, if you have ever been concerned or be bothered about, okay, how do political parties form? What does it mean to form a political party? I mean, even recently, INEC pushed out a publication saying about a number of political party. I don't want to miss the exact figure now. I think it's over 50 or thereabouts, if I'm not mistaken. They said I've submitted application to apply as a political party. So, and I think this topic for today will be very interesting relating to this newer reality that INEC has just published. How do political party get formed? What are the structures? How do they set the structure? These and many more are what we will be looking at today by our facilitator, Mr. Livinius Ibiang, who will be taking us through the topic, political parties and structure, for today's session in the cohort. Again, I welcome you all. So by this time, I'm officially welcome everyone to the class. I say welcome, and I want to encourage us to do what we know how to do best: participate, listen, and when it's time for question and answer, if you do have, share. If you also do have comments, you can always use the in-call messages to express your thoughts. So please take a listen as I recite the citation of our facilitator for today. Ibiang Gavinius is currently a public health and biosafety expert and a professional in politics with over 19 years working in the social sector to strengthen institutional reforms that can lead to social change. He had led several student or youth movements and have been involved in human rights advocacy. He was a former FCT interim chairman of Alliance for New Nigeria Party, ANN, and it was under his leadership that the party built the structure at the local government and ward level before his ascension to the office of the National Vice President of the party for the South-South Zone after the National Convention in 2018. In his capacity, he served in several committees, prominent amongst which is the Security Committee, which he chaired, the Partnership Committee with other parties for the general elections in 2019. He was also a member of the National Campaign Council of the party and served as the South-South Zonal Director and Chairman of the National Campaign. Ibiang is a graduate of the University of Calabar and holds several certifications in his chosen field. He holds, in addition, a Master's in Business Administration from Ahmadu Bello University and is currently a PhD candidate in International Public Health. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our facilitator for today. Like I did mention earlier, even while reading his profile and citation, you can already see that our trainer or facilitator for today is someone who is not only skilled or knowledgeable, but experienced in the formation of political parties and structure. He has lived the world of political party. He have gone through that experience, and he would be sharing with us not only from the theoretical framework, but more importantly for the experiential standpoint of his own journey into the world of politics, particularly as it concerns political parties and structure. Mr. Ibiang, please confirm you are with me and you're ready, sir.
Yes, I'm with you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good evening. And
good evening, sir. Thank you so much for all time. We appreciate you for always showing up for the Electoral College. So you have the floor now. You can go on, sir.
Thank you very much. Just give me a second. Let me.
All right. So while our facilitator is getting prepped and ready, please again, do remember to invite your colleagues across all the parties to be in the class. It's important for us to have this knowledge of political parties, its structures, and how they are formed. And every other question you have concerning political parties. Should you join political parties? Should you not join? At what point should you join? What interest do you have to hold before you join a political party? I think these are the questions we should have on our minds and be ready to post to our facilitator for today. Mr. Ibiang, I think you're back, and I unmute now, so you can go on.
Yes. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. And welcome once again to everyone on this very cohort of the Electoral College. I wouldn't want to bore you again with any intro. The moderator had given a lot of information about my very self-role. So I'll proceed to speak to the topic of the day. We'll be looking at political parties and structure. There's been quite a lot of questions in the minds of so many people with respect to what political parties and the structures that they hold actually represent. But to do this, we will need to go back in history just so that we understand political parties, how they came about, and what exactly political parties are. Like I said, a little bit of history will be very important. And as a background, it's important to know that political parties are fundamental to our democratic process. There can be no democracy without political parties, and this is, of course, something very profound and fundamental for us to know. Democracy, of course, as we know, is a form of government, but we also have other forms of government. Sorry. So democracy is a form of government, like I said, but then there are other forms of government. One thing that is very fundamental about democracy is the fact that it delegates power through an electoral process. And that's how leaders emerge from that process. And of course, it's a process that we're all very familiar with. It's also important to know that political parties are platforms through which power is contested for in any democratic system of government. And the history of political parties, of course, in Nigeria dates as far back as the British colonization of our country. Historically, if you go back, you discover that one very key figure played a role in the evolution of political parties in Nigeria, and that's speaking to Herbert Macaulay, who incidentally is the grandson of Bishop Ajayi Crowther, who formed the first political party in Nigeria, the Nigerian National Democratic Party in 1922. Now, here are some historical facts about political parties. The development of political parties in Nigeria, as I said, dates back to 1922-23, when the Nigerian National Democratic Party was launched. And then came the establishment of the Nigeria Legislative Council to provide some political space for participation of indigenes in the political affairs of Nigeria. Somewhere along the line, when we'll be looking at the history of constitutional development in Nigeria, we'll go in details into some of these things we're talking about, and you get to understand why we have it so. And following the establishment of the Nigerian Legislative Council to provide more space for participation by indigenes in the political governance of the country, it's instructive to know that participation in the Legislative Council at the time was merely advisory, because there were very few persons who were selected into the Legislative Council at the time. And so their role were basically advisory. And it was important to also know that franchise was limited to two cities, which were Lagos and Calabar at the time. Again, we'll talk about this in detail when we get to constitutional development. A more vigorous process of party formation was initiated with the formation of the Nigerian Youth Movement in 1938 and the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons at the time in 1944, still under the leadership of Herbert Macaulay. So you could see where we started from, that at some point we had the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons. That part of Nigeria is no more. It's now with the Cameroon. So then we had in 1948, the Action Group emerged, while the Northern People's Congress was established in 1951. These political parties constituted themselves as political expressions of ethno-regional associations. For instance, the Action Group in the West evolved from the Yoruba Cultural Association, which was referred to as the Egbe Omo Odudua at the time. And the Northern People's Congress evolved from the Northern Cultural Association, the Jami'a Mutanen Arewa, and then, of course, the National Congress of Nigerian Citizens, which started as a national party, later narrowed its base to a cultural association, mostly populated by the people from the Southeast. Now, these ethno-regional elite blocs struggled against each other for power. So there was serious contestation because we had the Eastern Bloc, the Northern Bloc, and then, of course, the Western Bloc. At the time, we didn't have the Midwestern Bloc, which later came up. Again, when we'll be talking about constitutional development, we'll delve into the emergence of the Midwestern Bloc. So they contested against each other, configuring the politics of the First Republic as a contest for hegemony by the elites of the major ethnic formations. We had the House of Fulani, the Yoruba, and then, of course, the Igbo. But in all of this, there was the minority, which were largely marginalized because there was absolutely no political platform that gave expression to the existence of the minority group, because the minorities were subsumed under the major political blocs that were present at the time, and which was the reason why between 1957 to 1958, there was the commissions that were established in London to look at the minority issues. Again, like I said, we'll be looking at all of those when we're talking about constitutional development in Nigeria and why the Commission on the Minorities was established, basically to look at some of the complaints that came from the minority ethnic groups. But let's proceed. Now, political parties and power sharing in the First Republic. So during the 1959 elections, no single party was able to win the majority of votes to emerge at the center. So the NPC, the Northern People's Congress, decided to join forces with the NCNC to form the national government at the time. This brought Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa in as the Prime Minister and Nnamdi Azikiwe Doctor as the Governor General on independence in 1960. So this is exactly what happened. So Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe later became the first president of Nigeria when Nigeria became a republic in 1963, while Tafawa Balewa maintained his position as the prime minister. It was also important to note that there was massive electoral fraud in the elections that followed in 1964 and 1965, and this precipitated a political crisis that led to the collapse of what was considered the First Republic. And the dissatisfaction in the system led to the splitting of the NCNC and the NPC. Don't forget, they came together to form the national government at the time. And as a result of the disagreement, they had to, part ways. Now, what happened after they parted ways? There was realignment of political parties. And as a result of the disagreement, NCNC joined forces with a faction of the Action Group that was led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo to form the United Progressive Grand Alliance, whereas the Northern People's Congress, on the other hand, joined forces with the remaining faction of the Action Group, led by Samuel Ladoke Akintola, to form the Nigerian National Democratic Party, NNDP. And then, of course, the Civil War broke, and we had military incursion into Nigerian politics, and Nigerian space witnessed, significant changes in the evolution of political parties subsequently. The period I termed blackout was the years of the Civil War from 1967 to 1970. And of course, if you look through history, and I'm sure you're already familiar with this, that we had the coup that took place in 1966, and then we had also the counter coups, and then eventually this resulted into the Civil War, which Nigeria experienced from 1967 to 1970. So within this period, it was basically the military that was in power. So that's why I termed it a blackout. But then there were political developments in the Second Republic. So in the run-up to the Second Republic, we had 150 parties that were announced. 50 of them were fully constituted as political parties, and only 18 were able to feel that they had any chance of meeting the imposed conditions, because yes, there were conditionalities for establishment of political parties at the time. But then the Nigerian state recognized only 5 of them in 1978, and which were the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, Unity Party of Nigeria, UPN, we have the NPP, and People's Redemption Party, PRP, and then Great Nigerian People's Party, GNPP. The 1979 Constitution banned independent candidates from contesting elections and outlawed regional, ethnic, religious, and extremist political parties. So, and it's important to also note that the 1979 Constitution was a product of the 1978 Constituent Assembly that was established by the government of the state, Nigeria, which of course, the work of that Constituent Assembly led to the product, the 1979 Constitution, which had formed like the skeleton upon which several other constitutions of Nigeria had been drafted. So what were the developments in the Second Republic? Again, we had one dominant party, which emerged from the transition process in 1978, and that is the National Party of Nigeria, and had its roots in the regional politics of the First Republic. Now, it's important to also know that the NPN was different from some of the political parties that were in existence in the First Republic, does not completely separate it from what we had in the First Republic, because a lot of those personages who were involved in the First Republic were also key players in the Second Republic, and some of the ideologies within those political parties were, of course, precursors to what eventually became the ideologies of the political parties in the Second Republic. So that's basically what we're trying to say. And the founding fathers of the NPN systematically waxed a coalition from some of the segmented and disparate fractions that constituted the Nigerian political class at the time. Of course, this is very typical. And you can see, if you look at Nigerian political landscape as of today, you will discover that there are exactly what we are describing today. You have, disparate groups. You have, some sort of realignment happening right now. A lot of cross-carpeting, a lot of movement from, one party to another. There are coalitions being talked about. There are movements here and there. And of course, the agitations for the registration of new political parties is still very much on the high today in the country. So you can see that everything that is happening today had happened before in the Second Republic. So the 1979 elections revealed that the political parties retained strong regional bases and ended up sharing the votes without any of them completely dominating the other. So you find a situation where the margin, the difference in the votes acquired by the political parties was very marginal. It was very marginal. So, and this was clearly a demonstration of the fact that these parties bear the roots of the parties that existed in the First Republic. Ideological politics was very strong with parties like People's Redemption Party, which was an offshoot of NEPU, Northern Element Progressive Union, and the Unity Party of Nigeria, which was, of course, an offshoot of the Action Group. So this is where you had more of very strong ideology. And then, of course, both parties were said to be on the left, while the other three parties were on the right. Now, so the Second Republic from 1978, when we had the transition and then eventual elections that brought in the then President Alhaji Shehu Shagari and his vice, Dr. Alex Ekweme, and who ruled Nigeria from 1979 to 1983. And then we had the elections that followed, and this, of course, was truncated by, yet again, a military incursion into Nigerian political space in 1983 by General Muhammadu Buhari, led junta at the time, who took over and the reins of affairs and of the country, and suspended the constitution and governed by military decree between 1983 to 1985. Again, another blackout in Nigerian political history. And then in 1985, while Buhari was still serving, he was subsequently overthrown by yet another military ruler in the person of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, who took over from 1985 up to 1993, when we had the Third Republic, following the transition to civil rule process. So note again that the Second Republic was born when we had the transition process to civil rule, and then we had the civil rule under the leadership of Alhaji Shehu Shagari, and then which was truncated by the military rule that ended the Second Republic. And then the Third Republic started when we had the transition process set up by the government of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida in 1992, culminating into the elections, the very popular elections that took place on June 12, 1993. So let's look at some of the developments in the Third Republic. The Third Republic, of course, had what we call the Third Republican Constitution, which was drafted in 1989. And of course, this was generally built from the 1979 Constitution. And then the establishment of new political parties, which were later banned by Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. And then the government established two major political parties. These were state-registered political parties. And they were the Social Democratic Party, which was considered slightly to the left. And of course, the National Republican Convention, NRC, which was considered slightly to the right. The Social Democratic Party flag bearer at the time was late Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, MK Abiola, popularly known as such. And NRC flag bearer was Chief Bashir Tofa, who ran that elections. So when elections were held in 1993 and MK Abiola of the SDP won, Babangida annulled the election, citing reasons. Of course, some of the reasons he had eventually released when he launched his book. I'm sure some of us watched the launch of the IBB book about his days in office. This, of course, precipitated the collapse of the Third Republic. It was that annulment led to a contraption that was not recognized in the ground norm of the country. That was the interim national government, which Ibrahim Babangida put together. And in interim national conference government was never contemplated in the Constitution of Nigeria, as it were. But because he had to hurriedly leave office, he put together the ING and appointed Chief Ernest Shonukon to head the interim national government. But something very remarkable happened while Chief Ernest Shonukon was in office. Now, what happened was that the Nigerian people felt slighted by the actions of General Ibrahim Babangida, in that here was an election that was adjudged to be free and fair, credible elections organized by the Electoral Commission at the time, under the leadership of Professor Humphrey Wosu, now of blessed memory. And following the annulment of that election, just a minute, please. Apologies, please. So following the annulment, the ING was set up, and the Nigerian people were not happy with that development because, in their opinion, the man who emerged the winner of that election should have been sworn in or given the opportunity to govern Nigeria. That's talking about Chief M.K. Abiola. So as a result, there was widespread protest in Nigeria. Everywhere was tensed, and Babangida already put together the ING, Interim National Government, under Chief Ernest Shonukon. But something very remarkable happened. In constituting the ING, he left behind a very ranking military officer in the person of General Sani Abacha, who served at the time as the Secretary of Defense and, of course, was the ranking officer in that government. There were several litigations against the interim national government. There were several litigations by very prominent Nigerians against the interim national government. Like I said, it was a contraption, never envisaged, never contemplated, and was never in the Constitution of Nigeria at the time. And so there was protestations everywhere in Nigeria. It was leading to, a political impasse at the time. And so General Sani Abacha did something very quickly by easing Shonukon out of office and taking over the reins of affairs in Nigeria. And that marked the end of the Third Republic. So General Sani Abacha became the head of state of Nigeria. And of course, typically, whenever you have a military government in place, it suspends the constitution and rules by decrees. So Abacha, of course, ruled by decree. And all through the period he was in office from 1993 down up to somewhere in May, June 1998 when he passed. And when he died in office, there was, consultations around the country as to who becomes the head of state. And that was when General Abdul Salami Abubakar, who was then the Chief of Defense Staff, again a very ranking military officer, was decided as the new head of state of Nigeria. So General Abdul Salami became the head of state. And what he did, because he was very considered apolitical, he quickly enunciated the transition process to hand over power to a civilian government. That transition process led to the birth of the Fourth Republic, which we all are in today. And we had, in 1998, the transition process started. And then in 1999, we had the elections. So the period from 1993 was a blackout because it was a period that was under the military rule. And then, of course, the 1999, the Fourth Republic was bettered. And then we had the 1999 Constitution. So for its first election, the Independent National Electoral Commission recognized only three political parties at the start. They were the People's Democratic Party, the All People's Party, and the Action for Democracy, AD, and who's the current president, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was a very popular figure in the AD at the time and was one of the key leaders of the party because he was at the time the governor of Lagos State under that political party, Action for Democracy, AD, and usually was considered as the last man standing because even when PDP overran most of the states in the western part of the country, Lagos State was one state that, PDP could not upturn because of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So following a Supreme Court judgment on the case instituted by Balarabe Musa and INEC, conditions for registration of political parties were further liberalized, allowing more political parties to subsequently join the political space. Prominent among the new political parties were Action Congress of Nigeria, ACN, the Congress for Political Progressive Change, and the People's Progressive Alliance were some of the new political parties that came on stream as a result of the liberalization of the registration of political parties. There were other smaller political parties that took advantage of the liberalization process to register the parties, and some of these parties, of course, proved to be unviable because they didn't win any seats in either legislature or any of the executive positions. So, in fact, some of them were regarded as briefcase political parties. So, in order to promote credible elections with the existence of strong political parties, Section 78(6) of the 2010 Electoral Act provided INEC with the power to deregister political party that failed to win any executive or legislative seat. Like I said, some of the many political parties that took advantage of the liberalization process were unviable because they couldn't win any seats, whether in the legislature nor in the executive. So as a result, sometime in 2011, INEC deregistered 7 political parties that did not contest for any election. And look, it's very interesting to know that most of the parties that registered at the time registered because of the incentive that was made available to political parties. There was a time that political parties were getting some sort of subvention from, government through INEC. But it was discovered that most of the political parties that were registered were basically registering so that they can access those funds, not necessarily because they want to, win any political seats. So these were some of the reason behind why that was discontinued, and INEC had to prune down by deregistering some, political parties. So at the end of 2012, an additional 31 political parties were deregistered, leaving only about 27 registered political parties. Of course, at the time, there was a full list of all of those political parties that survived the hammer of INEC. So we've come from the history of political parties and basically establishing that political parties are indeed the vehicle via which political offices are sought, competed for, and won. Now we want to look at the Nigerian political landscape and what systems exist therein. There are a substantial number of critical stakeholders within the Nigerian political landscape, and some of them, this may not be all. There may be many others. I'm sure you could think through some of those ones that might be in existence, but very important. The critical stakeholders, they are politicians, political parties. We also have political movements. These are organizations that have not yet become political party, but are very political in terms of ideology and operations. And then we have the electoral system in place. We have the electoral umpires who operate that system. We have anti-corruption crusaders. We have electorates like you and I And then we have the branches of government, the judiciary, the legislature, the executives. We have traditional institutions. We have, pressure groups that may not necessarily be political organizations, but then they are pressure groups and helping to ensure that government sticks to its promises. We have civil society organizations. We have situation rooms that have been established today to give updates and to monitor electoral processes in Nigeria. And we have a group of people who call themselves technicians who are also considered very critical stakeholders in the Nigerian political space. And all of these stakeholders, I must say, serve basically to deepen our political culture and form the political structure via which government is served. So now that we know what political parties are, and I said they are defined as organized group of people with at least roughly similar political aims and opinions that seek to influence public policy by getting their candidates elected to public office. So every political party has an agenda, what they call their manifesto. And the manifesto is an articulation of what the political party intends to do for the citizens should it be elected into office. So if you must project your manifesto, if you have plans to serve the country, then you must win elections to be able to do that. And the only way you can win elections is through political parties, because we have established that political parties are the vehicle via which public offices are sought for, competed, and won. So parties, of course, are deeply and durably entrenched in specific substratas of the society. Why? For purposes of sustainable and well-functioning democracy. That's why you can talk about structure. Two, they link the governmental institutions to the elements of the civil society in a free and fair society. And three, they are necessary for the functioning of any modern democratic political system. So political parties are very, very important. They are very important. So if you want to talk about sustainable political systems, you must have political parties that are well-rooted within the Nigerian substructures, from the state to the local government, to the ward, now to the communities, and in fact, down to families. And so you have political families in Nigeria. So that's that. So what do political parties do? Again, like I said, political parties solicit and articulate public policy priorities. They consider civic needs and problems. What are the problems of the Nigerian states? What do the people consider their priority? These are the things that political parties articulate. Political parties, of course, socialize and educate voters and citizens in the functioning of the political and electoral system and the generation of general political values. So if you must have political values, political parties must play a very critical role in creating those values. And they do this through socialization and education of the citizens. But if I may ask, how many political parties are involved in providing political education in Nigeria? I'm sure you and I know the answer already, which again is the reason why the Electoral College was established, because the founder of the Electoral College saw a major gap from his experience and from his participation in the political process. And it was that gap that is sought to fill by, pulling like minds together to establish the Electoral College, which we are all part of today, providing political literacy to the Nigerian people. So I think the founder, I don't know if he's on the call him Senator, my very good friend, Kunle Lawa, deserve some accolades and his flowers for the great job for envisioning this platform that has brought all of us together today to learn and also understand what political parties are and how they fit into the entire democratic process. What do political parties do? They provide balanced opinion, balance opposing demands. They balance opposing demands and convert them into general policy. So it means that political parties must accommodate dissenting views. They must accommodate alternative views. Political parties cannot be, cannot know everything. A political party can't know everything. Other political parties also have articulated their manifesto and programs. So, and those political parties that do not win election remain in opposition and provide alternative views on how Nigeria can be governed. So political parties in power must balance, opposing demands and learn to take those opinions and convert them into general policies to better the lots of the Nigerian people. And political parties also activate and mobilize citizens to participate in political decisions and transform their opinions into viable policy options. This is the reason we encourage people to join political parties, okay? So that those ideas that you have, you can bring them up within the political parties, and those eventually may find their way into policies and programs of the party, and also become policies and programs of the government of the day, assuming that the political party wins elections. Again, political parties channel public opinion from citizens to government. So you see, a political party must be able to situate itself in a way that it listens to public opinion about certain policy issues and from citizens, and channel that appropriately to government rather than misinform or misguide the government in power, which of course in most instances is the case here in Nigeria. And then political parties, of course, recruit and train candidates for, public offices. And in fact, these are the ideal functions of political parties, because if you look at our leadership selection process, it's obvious that political parties don't actually provide some form of training or education to candidates that emerge as flag bearers of the party and who then go ahead to become elected into office. Quite clearly, it doesn't seem like there is any form of education, because you find a lot of if you look around the political space and in most of the leadership positions in the country, you find people who are very clueless about governance. People do not really, some public office holders do not understand what governance is. In fact, there are people who don't have any business being in the offices that they occupy. But then they find themselves in those places because the political parties that threw them up did not provide the kind of orientation and training that this person should have. Now, for every political party, there are operational imperatives, okay? So if you are in a political party, there are things that are sacrosanct, that must be available, that to give people a sense of belonging and security. And those operational imperatives are tasks that those political parties had to take up. And these include elements that have been provided for in our constitution. They are sacrosanct and you can't waive them. Every political party must observe them because people need to be, there has to be inclusivity within the political party systems. And these include freedom of organization. That's one. There is freedom to stand for elections. So people who belong to a political party must exercise their freedom to be able to stand for elections. There is also freedom of speech. People must be able to have the guarantee to speak and gather and commune. There has to be provision of a fair and peaceful competition among parties and candidates. So one political party must not take advantage of the political space and usurp the privileges of others as provided for in the Constitution. And then there are also mechanisms to ensure plurality, inclusion in the electoral process and contacts with electoral bodies, a level playing field and freedom from discrimination, either by way of sex, or gender, religion, or cultural background. There should be media access and fair reporting guaranteed. And of course, there has to be transparency and accountability when it comes to political finances. So these are operational imperatives that every political party must necessarily observe. So political parties are essential institutions of democracy. We've said that over and over. We've also said they compete in elections and offer citizens a choice in governance. This is based on the different political parties and candidates and the choices that the citizens have to make as to who governs them, because the choices you make determine to a large extent how Nigeria will be governed. In opposition, they can hold governments accountable. When citizens join political parties, volunteer their time, donate money, and vote for their leaders, they are exercising their basic democratic rights. That's exactly what it is. And the participation of citizens in political parties provides a unique benefit. For instance, ability to influence policy choices, choose and engage political leaders, and then, of course, run for office. These are some benefits that political parties offer. And however, in some countries, political parties do not respect the rights of its citizens to participate, and sometimes not accountable to voters. And I'm sure when I say some countries, Nigeria inclusive, and I'm sure you all know this. So that's something that has to be corrected. So there is a management for political parties. Political parties need to be properly managed. And the management of political parties is guided by the structure in the political parties, structure in the political parties, and the function by the following. One, there is a party constitution and manifesto. This, of course, provides the structure and also provides the guide by which the political parties governed and also managed. There is a code of conduct for members. Every political party must have a code of conduct for its members. And then political parties have what we call conventions. Conventions are basically previous agreement, resolutions, regulations, party standing rules, and extant guidelines of the party. All of these constitute conventions of the party. We have customs, which of course include culture, procedures, practices, CG, consensus, and so on. Let me also say that what is custom, what becomes customary in any setting is something that has resulted from, continuous practices, something you do every so often. So over time, it becomes a custom, it becomes customary that people do that. And then you have also judicial pronouncement. A lot of judicial pronouncements have become rules or what you call additional piece of legislations, of course, by which our political systems are managed or governed. And then you have the electoral laws. And above all, the ground norm of the country, that is the Constitution. So the Constitution, of course, establishes the framework by which political parties are established and governed. And as we know, there is a supremacy clause in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that says that any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution of Nigeria, that other law shall, to the extent of its inconsistency, be null and void. So that is what establishes the supremacy of the Nigerian Constitution over any other law that exists in the political space. Now, having said that, we will now conclude with the structures of political parties. Like I said, the structures of political parties are well established within the constitution of those parties. And what so many had asked and wondered as to what the structures of political parties are is what we are unveiling to all of us today. So the critical structures of a political parties are as follows, and this basically refers to the layers of political governance within the political party itself, beginning from the Ward Executive Committee to the Ward Congresses, the Local Government Executive Committee to the Local Government Area Congress. In some places, we have the Senatorial District Executive Committee, and then we have the Senatorial Congress, we have the State Working Committee, the State Executive Committee, the States Congress, we have the Zonal Working Committee, we have the Zonal Executive Committee, we have the Zonal Congresses, the National Working Committee. So all of this, and then of course we have the National Convention of the party, which is the highest decision and lawmaking organ of every political party. So to those who've been wondering, what are these structures? Structures. You hear people talk about structures. This is the structure of the political party. This is the meat. And what happens at these levels is very important, as we'll see. I'll take a few examples of these structures to speak to, so we understand how important the structures of a political parties are. Let's take, for instance, the Ward Executive Committee. The Ward Executive Committee does the following: administration of the party at the ward level. It raises funds for the party at the ward level. It conducts membership drive for the party. It draws up strategies for political campaigns at the ward level. It implements the decision of the Ward Congress and other organs of the party. It receives the ward auditor report and performs such other function as may be in the interest of the party, and as may from time to time be assigned to it by higher organs of the party. So that is the Ward Executive Committee. Very important. Very, very important. Now, don't forget I talked about the implementing the decisions of the Ward Congress. So you'll be wondering, so what is the difference between the Ward Executive Committee and the Ward Congress? So this is the Ward Congress. Now, first of all, understand that the Ward Executive are made up of elected party officials at the ward level. Now, the Ward Congress is composed of the following persons. You have the elected political office holders, that is the Ward Executive. You also have elected political office holders like councillors, local government, elected local government chairmen. They are also members of the Ward Congress. And then you have registered members of the party who are also members of the Ward Congress. So with all of these personages I've mentioned, you will see that the Ward Congress is bigger than the Ward Executive Committee. And the Ward Congress is like the parliament of the party at the ward level. And we have these also at the state level, and of course, at the national level, we have the National Convention. So what are the functions of the Ward Congress? The Ward Congress receives the report of officers of the ward, that is the Ward Executive. It receives the auditor's report. It approves the budget of the Ward Executive. So you can see it functions as the legislative organ of the party at the ward level. Then it elects, note this, it elects the members of the Ward Executive Committee. So members of the Ward Executive Committee are elected by the Congress, by the Ward Congress. It conducts primaries for the ward elections. So the ward elections include the election of councillors at the local government. Don't forget, the councillors eventually come together to become the legislative council, that is the parliament at the local government. This is different from the ward Congress. Please note that. Councillors, so for instance, in a local government that has 12 wards, so it means that 12 councillors are going to be elected. These councillors are the legislators at the local government level. They become the legislative council at the local government level, and they elect their speaker, usually called the leader of the Congress at the local government level. So that provides the checks that the local government executive, ought to have. So that very important structure, body at the local government level is elected by, the primaries of which are conducted by the ward congresses of that political party. The ward congress also carries out such other function as may be in the interest of the party, maybe as assigned by higher organs of the party, as we shall see subsequently. So that is that about the ward congress. So please note, you have the ward executive, and then you have the ward congress. And then we have the local government executive. Don't forget, if you have 12 wards, then at the local government level, you also have executives. And the structure, the manner of election of the local government executive council is in a way that guarantees representation from across all the wards that make up that local government. This is in alignment or in compliance with the provisions of the Constitution that guarantees fair and equal representation. So the local government executive committee of the party, don't forget again, we are not talking about the local government system at the local government. We are talking about the political party structure. So there is a structure at the local government level. We have dealt with the ward. Now we are at the local government. So at the local government, you have the executive committee. And what are their functions? It includes administration of the party. They run the administration of the party. They raise funds. They do membership drive, draw campaign strategies, mobilize voters, provide voter education, undertake general administration of the party, and even employ secretariat staff of the party. So those are some of the functions that the local government executive committee of the party perform at the local government levels. Now, let's look at the local government area congress. Just like we had the ward congress, we also have the local government area congress, which also serves as the legislative component of the party at the local government level. So at the local government level, the local government party chairman and other members of the local government area executive committee are automatic members of the local government area congress. Then all the national, zonal, state executive members of the party who are from that local government are also members of the local government area congress. So you see, the body is beginning to be bigger than the executive. And then you have elected local government council chairmen and their vice, as well as the councillors who are elected on the platform of the party. They are also members of the local government area congress. This is the reason the congresses are bigger than or superior to the the local government executive. And then you have all chairmen and secretaries of the ward executive committee from the local government. So if you have 12 wards, the chairmen and secretaries of the ward, chairmen and secretaries of the parties at the ward are members of the local government area congresses. And then you have, in addition to all of that, 3 delegates from each ward of the local government area elected at the ward congresses. at least one of whom shall be a woman. This is basically to make for inclusion and gender balancing in terms of participation, all of whom shall cease to function at the conclusion of the Congress for which they were elected. So these additional delegates that are elected from each of the ward, they go on to become members of the state party Congress for purpose of electing the state party executive officers of the party, and also in electing who becomes the gubernatorial candidate of the party. Please note this is very important. Now, what are the functions of the local government area Congress? They elect members of the local government executive committee of the party, yes. They elect the local government council chairmanship candidate. So for anyone who wishes to become the chairman of a particular local government, it is the local government congress of the party that conducts the election of the candidate for the party. Very important. And then they also elect local government party delegates to the national convention. So there are delegates elected from the ward that go to the state party congress to elect the gubernatorial candidate and the elected officials of the party at the state level. At the national convention, where the presidential candidate is elected, it is the local government area congress that elects the delegates to the national convention of the party. It approves the budget of the party at the local government level and receives local government auditors report. I'm sure we are very clear with these structures and what they do. So this is how important the structures of the political party. Now, I'll talk about the state's party structure, and then I'll move straight to the national. At the state level, for some political parties, not all, for some, you have what you call the state caucus. Some have what you call the state elders committee. I had to list all of this, and then based on the parties it applies to, you can, appreciate why these have to be in place. And then we have the state executive committee of the party. That's what you call the state working committee. And then you have the state party congress, which is also like the legislative arm of the party at the state level. In some political parties, you have what you call the state assembly congress. These ones conduct the primaries for all those who wish to go contest for houses of assembly or house of assembly elections. And then you also, in some parties, you have the House of Representatives Congress. These ones conduct primaries for all those who wish to contest for a seat in the House of Rep. And then you have senatorial district congresses, which also conducts primaries for senatorial candidate election. Now, this vary from party to party, but I had to put everything here so that we don't limit the subject. Now, let's talk about the state party congress, which is like the legislative arm of the party at the state level. We have the following functions. It approves the budget. It elects officers of the state executive committee, that is the state working committee. It elects the governorship candidate of the party. It receives report from the officers of the party and receives the state party auditors report. Those are the functions of the state party congress at the state level. Now, we move to the national. And at the national, now that we understand and appreciate what the structures of the political parties are, at the national level, we have what we call the National Working Committee. This is largely the elected officials of the party, elected at the national convention of the party. And this includes, depending on the political party, the national chairman, deputy, national vice chairman, national secretary, deputy, and all of the offices that you have here. And there can be more. You may have more than these officers listed here, depending on the political party. What are their functions? Just like the word, the executive, the local government executive, and the state executive, the National Working Committee, of course, is responsible for the day-to-day functions of the party. They run administration. And in case of the emergency, they can act on behalf of the National Executive Committee. And they perform such other functions as may be assigned to it by the National Executive Committee. So the National Executive Committee of the party is actually bigger. It is bigger in that beyond the National Working Committee, you also have the state chairman of the party who are members of NEC. You have elected officials who are people who are elected into public office, who are members of NEC, like governors are members of NEC. You have like the Senate president, deputy, especially if they are members of the party, they are also members of NEC. So the NEC is big. The NEC is very big. In some instances, very big. So it directs the National Working Committee on what needs to be done in terms of general administration. In some political parties, you have the National Caucus. I won't go into details of this. This presentation, of course, is going to be made available to all of you. In some parties, you have the National Caucus, and typically like parties like PDP have the National Caucus. And then you also, in terms of composition, we have chairman and secretary of the board of trustees of the party who are members of the National Caucus. You have the deputy national chairman, we have national secretary of the party, the legal advisor and treasurer, women leader and youth leader. And then you have 3 federal ministers who are members of the party and serving ministers who are also members of the party nominated by the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. One of whom shall be, of course, the Attorney General of the Federation. So if you have, for instance, like APC, the president may nominate some ministers to be members of the National Caucus if they have a National Caucus. So that's basically how the composition is. So just to say that in some political parties, you have, in addition to the National Working Committee, the National Executive Committee, you have the National Caucus, and then you also have what you call the Legislative Caucus. I'd like to dwell a little bit here because it's very important. So within the National Assembly, as the name implies, National Legislative Caucus, this exists within the National Assembly. So for instance, in the National Assembly, you have the Legislative Caucus of the APC, you have the Legislative Caucus of the PDP, you have the Legislative Caucus of the Labour Party, you have the Legislative Caucus of NNDP, you have the Legislative Caucus of all the political parties that exist, okay? And this Legislative Caucus is made up of members in the Senate and the House of Representatives. I'll tell you one of the things that they do. Look at it. The major functions or tasks of parliamentary groups in the legislature are summarized as follows. 1, they choose the floor leaders. So when you hear majority leader, it is not just the Senate president that appoints. No, it is the Legislative Caucus that decides, because that is the party within the legislature. They decide who becomes the leader of the Senate, the deputy leader, the minority leader, the majority leader, the chief whip, minority chief whip, and so all that. So it is the decision of the Legislative Council, caucus. That's what they do. And if you also look at allocation of committees, so who becomes or emerges as chairman of a committee is a function of the Legislative Caucus of the party. So chairman, vice chairman of the committees, the membership of those committees is also a function of the Legislative Caucus. And this is very, very important. So they identify different and distinctive interests and wings in the party group. Now, what that means is that every legislative caucus of a political party must determine that a particular policy of government that is coming to the legislature for legislative scrutiny or deliberations, okay, it must be able to identify that that policy or program is beneficial to the people of Nigeria and to the political party itself. It must weigh how that policy or bill or program will impact the general populace before it wings in its members to support. So when you hear that both the Labour Party, the PDP, the APC support a particular policy of government, it means that the political parties agree that that policy is important for the country. So they all wing in their members or whip their members in line to ensure that they vote for that particular policy. That is one of the functions of the legislative caucus. And then persuasion of party members. They have to persuade their party members and also exercise disciplinary action to take a common position on important issues. So those are the critical functions. And that's why I had to dwell on the legislative caucus. And that's also a structure of the party. So you can see, very important structure because they determine what happens in the National Assembly. Now, I talked about the composition of NEC earlier, that in addition to the National Working Committee of the party, there are other persons who make up the NEC. And I said it could be the governors. You can see here, we have all the governors. We have former chairman and deputy chairman of the party, national secretaries, chairman and secretary of board of trustees are also members of NEC. And then you also have 6 ex-officio members, at least 2 of whom shall be women, elected from each of the 6 geopolitical zones who are members of NEC. And this is very common in PDP. And then the president of the Senate, the deputy, the Senate leader, deputy Senate leader, the House Speaker, deputy Speaker, leader of the leader and deputy leader in the House of Representative and Senate are also members, and then the chief whip and all that. So you see, the NEC is a bigger structure. That's why whenever the NEC is meeting, you find a lot of people there because critical decisions are going to be taken. So that's why the NEC can direct the National Working Committee. So the NEC convenes the National Convention and appoint the Convention Organizing Committee. They carry out the decisions and instructions of the National Convention. They supervise and direct the work of the party at all levels, okay? And they ensure that all the organs of the party function democratically and effectively, and initiate policies and programs for approval by the National Convention. They also propose amendment to the constitution of the party, if any. They can propose that, pending when the National Convention is convened. And then subject to the provisions of the constitution of the party, make party electoral guidelines, regulations, sorry, to govern the conduct of elections to all party offices at every level. And they also make standing rules for approval by the National Convention. So you can see everything is subject to the National Convention, like I said, which is the highest decision-making organ of the party. And then we have the Board of Trustees. I won't dwell on this because our time is fast spent. There are functions, of course, of the Board of Trustees. And finally, we have the National Convention, which is the highest, the supreme organ of the party. And here is where key issues like the election of the presidential flag bearer is done here. The election of the National Working Committee members is also done here. Amendment of the Constitution or adoption of a new constitution is also done at the National Convention. And new laws are made here at the National Convention. And it also has its composition of the National Convention. Okay, those who make up the members of that convention. And so I talked about the functions, policies, formulate policies and programs, raise funds, elect and remove national officers of the party, and elect the presidential candidate of the party, propose amendment to the constitution of the party, and regulations can also be drafted and passed at the convention, and so on. So those are the functions of the National Convention. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about the structures of the political parties with insights from political evolution of the political party evolution from way back in the colonial past. And now that we know what the structures are, and I can tell you that maybe there are other structures of political parties, like partnerships that are formed by political parties, mergers that are formed by political parties, coalitions like CUPP. They are all structures of political parties. For instance, the CUPP at some point it was a coalition of united political parties, right? But at some point, it was obvious that it was an appendage of the People's Democratic Party. And of course, you can think about other structures of the political parties. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll pause here and take a few questions. Here are some of the references made in preparing this particular lecture. So, thank you. And over to you, our dear moderator.
Okay, now we'll take questions. I believe that we already have hands raised. From my screen, I have 6 hands raised already. Thank you so much, Mr. Livinus Ibiang, for sharing and for facilitating this. I'll start with the very first hand I've seen on, who is Patrick Igba Aka. I've asked you to unmute. Please keep your questions short so that we can accommodate others. Go ahead, please. Patrick, you've unmuted yourself again. I've asked you to unmute, please.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My questions are, let me just put it this way. We've just heard so much about political parties, and we have seen clearly that practically in Nigeria, we may not have political parties per se, in the sense that we have seen arguments where people say what we have today are special purpose vehicles, where people just use these parties and then get into office. So what I want to ask is that how do we achieve parties that are ideologically based, so that when people contest under these platforms and get into office, they will get into office and remain in those parties, not the current situation where people contest elections under parties. When they get into office, before you know it, they are then moving, towards the party at the center for reasons best known to them. How do we get to that point? People will have no choice than to remain in the parties that they want elections under their platforms. Hello?
Yeah, I got your question. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, let's take another question. I will just address that because in addressing this, I may be answering some others.
Okay. So, sorry, please. I have another question. I think I can go ahead and ask.
No, let's just try and accommodate all the others. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay.
Please. Okay. All right. I would ask Oluwatosin David to please unmute, please.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I want to thank our teacher, our facilitator for today, for his teaching. I just have 2 questions. My first question is that I saw that when it was mentioning the structures of the party, he never mentioned the office or the unofficial office of the leader of the party, because we have seen whereby the president of the country assumes the role of the national leader of the party, and the governor assumes the governor, whichever party they belong to, assume the role of the leader of the party. So I just wanted to speak about on that. Then my second question, when you were talking about the legislative, you was talking about the national legislative caucus.
Sorry, Tosin. We try as much as possible so that we can accommodate others. Okay. If you notice,
Okay.
I didn't let Patrick ask his second question. Thank you, please. You can put it in the chat box. Maybe we can take it from there, but let's give every other person an opportunity. Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right then. Prince Rutherford, I've asked you to unmute. Please, let's keep the questions short. One question, please. Thank you. Prince, I've asked you to unmute, please. If you're not ready, I'll move on quickly to the next person. Okay, Mustafa Issa.
Hello, good evening. First of all, I want to thank the Electoral College and the presenter for this wonderful presentations. My question goes directly as follows. Now, in the course of the presentation, the presenter made mention party congress and party executive. I believe they are distinct structure of the party. Does the Congress, Congress, is it the party members, the general party members in the what level? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sir Ibiang, do you want to take those or do you want one more so that maybe we'll take 5 at a go? Hello, sir.
Yes, let's take more.
Okay. Prince, are you ready to speak now? I've asked you to unmute again because I see your hand. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Good evening. So my question is this. The first lecture we had where we discussed the origin of democracy, puts the origin of democracy at 500 BC in Athens. And from historical context, democracy has lasted without political parties for over 2,000 years. But the facilitator at the beginning of his lecture said that there can be democracy without political parties. So I want us to look into that situation. If there could be a balance there somewhere. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
I don't know if that's the question
could you
or
take
a
that
comment.
question again? Could you take that question again? I want to hear that question again.
All right. So sorry. What I was saying is at the beginning of your lecture, sir, you said that democracy cannot exist without political parties. But on the first day of our lecture, when we discussed the origin of democracy, the facilitator then said that democracy began about 500 years before Christ. However, by historical context, the first political party ever known to exist was somewhere around the 19th century. That means we have had democracy for about 2,000 years without political parties. So I want us to look at it and let's see where there can be a balance there. What do you say, Steve?
Okay, very, very good question. Thank you,
Yeah,
Prince Rutherford.
yes.
Okay, all right. I think it was just an emphasis I was trying to make that given our current context, you agree with me that the sustenance of democracy is largely driven by the existence of political structures. Because if you look at the period you talked about when democracy was founded, it wasn't on the basis of political parties. It was understanding that people have to come together to agree on something. So you seek the opinion of everyone who was available. Those were some of the things that gave birth to, democracy. In our context today, we have democratic governance at different levels. So beyond our political systems, even in our communities where you don't have political parties, you find that the principle of democracy, which has to do with inclusivity, is maintained. So you are correct. It was just an emphasis to say that our democratic practice as a country and as a people is driven largely by the existence of political parties. That's just the emphasis I'm trying to make. It is not so much so that democracy cannot exist without the political parties. That's not the emphasis. It is just to say that in our context, these are democratic structures and which have helped to deepen the principles and practice of democracy in Nigeria. That's the point I'm trying to make. I hope that clarifies that to everybody. But thank you very much for bringing that up. It clearly shows that you guys are really listening. Okay, so let me answer the other questions and then we can take the second round. One, Patrick wants to know how we can achieve parties that are purely ideologically based. And that's also a very good question. And one of the big questions on the mouths or the hearts or lips of, most persons is whether the political parties that we have today are ideologically based. And if they are, what are the distinctions in terms of ideology between these political parties? And this is the way I would like to approach this. I will blanketly tell you that there is no party that doesn't have ideology. There is no party that doesn't have ideology. That's one. Number two, each of you members of this cohort have been placed in different political parties. I'm sure in the course of your work, you've had cause to look at the parties that you represent in the cohort, in this cohort. So for instance, if you say you are a member of NNDP, I imagine that you would have taken time to look at the NNDP constitution, the NNDP manifesto, and its program. You should then be telling us what the party ideology is about. If you say you are a member of the Labour Party, you should also be able to tell us what the Labour Party ideology is about. You may not go into detail, you can summarize it in one catchphrase that depicts what the ideology of the Labour Party is, or NNDP, or APC, or PDP, or whatever party that you are representing. I say this because there is no party you will approach today that will tell you they do not have an ideology. The Alliance for New Nigeria, which I served, had its own ideology. It has its own ideology. The other political parties also have the ideology. And I've heard a lot of members of the different political parties talk about the ideology. So there is no party that doesn't have ideology. I think the point is that we must find a way to ensure that the party remains supreme within our democratic context. That's one. Number two, we must also strengthen institutions, because one of the reasons why it seems as though the parties are just special purpose vehicle, like you call it, is because the institutions are weak. And when I talk about the institution, from the political parties to the, the branches of government, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. In Nigeria today, the legislature is almost an appendage of the executive. In fact, I've heard very, very strong, opinions and comments describing the judiciary as the legal department of a political party. This clearly shows the weakness in the institutions. And this is the reason I'm saying this. If these institutions are strengthened and independent in their function and provide the needed checks and balances, you will not have the kind of crisscrossing that we have amongst political parties today. The law says, when you cross carpets from the party via which you were elected into office in the legislature to another party, you automatically lose your seat. In Nigeria, they'll tell you that is not all. The court will tell you a different thing. But the law is the law. It's very explicit. So, in Nigeria, in our own context, the law is not what it seems. That's basically what we are learning. The law is not what it seems. Yes, the law says if you cross carpet, you lose your position. You lose your seat, rather. You automatically leave that assembly. It's more like someone who is resigning. That's exactly what you have done. But then, the judiciary will interpret a different thing entirely. That it doesn't end there. In fact, in the case of Rivers State, the judiciary said there is no, the names of those persons that were said to have cross-carpeted. It's not in the register of APC. It is the judiciary that told us that. And we're wondering what is the business of the judiciary in all of that. So this is the problem. So we have weak institutions. And as a result of the weak institutions that we have, we do not have, parties cannot exercise their supremacy. Take, for instance, the reason why Tosin talked about the leader of the party. These are contraptions. The leader of the party is no other than the chairman of the party. The chairman of the party is the oga patapata of the party. He is the leader of the party. But you see in Nigeria, the president of the party, the president of the country, who is a member of the party, automatically becomes the leader of the party. The governor of a state, elected under a particular party, becomes a leader of the party in the state, where then goes the chairman of the party at the state and at the national level. This is what wears away the powers of the chairman. And for those who remember, when Obasanjo was the president of this country, there was a mini altercation between Obasanjo and Chief Audu Ogbe, who was the then national chairman of the PDP before he joined the APC. What was it about? It was a case of, exercise of authority as much as party activities are concerned. So the weak institutions that we have pave way for the instances we have today, where you now have leaders of the party who are people like the president or the governor at the state level, or local government chairman at the local government level, as the case may be. These are contraptions, and it causes a lot of, confusion and duplication in the party system. So these are challenges that we have to deal with. So one of the major reasons is the weak institutions that we have. So that's one of the reasons why you have that. So if we must achieve political parties that are ideologically based, yes, they are ideologically based. They have the ideologies. No party will tell you that they don't have the ideology. But the problem is that enforcing discipline and exercising authority at the party level is what is lacking. And this is largely because of the weakness of the institution. In a recent case in a PDP, the court affirmed that the party should go back and resolve its issues. I'm sure you heard of the leadership tussle in PDP. The Supreme Court eventually upheld that the party, these are issues of the party. So matters of parties should be handled at the party level. These are things that makes the party supreme. You can imagine that judicial pronouncement by the Supreme Court. The same applies to the Labour Party as well. Okay, so if you have those kind of pronouncements, it makes the party strong, and everybody will then begin to be scared of just jumping ship when there is no crisis or division in the party. So I guess I've answered the question, the Tosi's question with respect to leader of the party, and to say that yes, I didn't talk about the leader of the party as a structure, but like I said, it's a function of the political party. It depends on what the political party establishes as a structure. That's what will exist. If there is some sort of administration that goes on within the office of the leader of the party, who is the president, then it becomes a structure, and you have people either elected or appointed to assist the president as the leader of the party in discharging his functions as the leader of the party, not as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. These are distinct responsibilities. So if the party establishes that, then it so exists. So that's that. Now, the other question is on Mustafa wants to know the distinction, I hope is a distinction, between the party executive and the party congress. They are two different structures. So the party executives, first let's begin with let me take the states, for instance. At the state level, you have the state working committee. The state working committee is made up of those party officials who are elected at the state party congress to run the administration of the party at the state level. Still within the state level, you have the state executive committee, not the state working committee. They are two different things. You have the state working committee who are elected party officials. Then you have the state executive committee made up of the state working committee, chairmen and secretaries of the local government executive in the state. So if a state has 20 local government areas, the local government executive committees of the party in the 20 local governments are also members of the state party, state executive committee. So the chairman and secretaries are members, or the chairman only, depending on the party. The party defines who becomes the member of the state executive committee. The other persons may include the governor, if he is a member of the party, the deputy governor, the speaker of the house, deputy speaker, and other officials who may have been designated to be members of the executive committee of the party. So that's what makes up the executive committee of the party at the state level. Again, like I said, the caveat is it depends on the party. Now, the Congress, the state party Congress is bigger. The state party Congress include the state working committee, the chairman and secretaries of the local government structure of the party, the delegates that were elected at the ward congresses, who three delegates are members of the state party Congress. You have the president, if he's a member of the party from that particular state. You have National Assembly members who may also be members of the party and who are from a particular state. They are also members. So you see, it's a bigger structure. And that is why the congresses function as the legislative arm of the party at that level. So I hope this makes the distinction clearer to Mustafa. And then, of course, the last one was by Prince Rutherford on the existence of democracy before. But yeah, of course, we'll address that. And I agree with you. So thank you. Moderator, over to you.
Thank you so very much, sir. Thank you so much. So I'll take more questions from the from the comment from the in-call message. So to begin with, I think some questions have been answered. Some questions are directed to the Electoral College and that has been answered. So this question, if Samuel Obangida said, my questions goes like this: since we once had opportunity for an individual democracy, what was it ruled? Why was it ruled out, and what are the advantages and disadvantages? I don't know. I think that is one. Do I need to read more before you answer?
Please take that again. Take that again. Take that again.
Okay. So the question says, since we once had an opportunity for an individual candidacy, why was it ruled out, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of? So this person is talking about independent candidacy. Actually, it's called independence candidacy. This person is talking about independent. Why was it ruled out, and are there disadvantages or advantages to it that you would like to share with us, sir?
Yeah, let's take more questions.
Okay. So the next question says, so this person have a number of questions, but I think, so it says, how do we achieve party supremacy? It says the way political parties are run in Nigeria, where the judiciary sometimes steps in to restore sanity, will independent candidacy help the situation? So I think that would still go with the other question. Then the question, it is not high time we have, is it not high time we have independent candidacy to address the prohibitive cost of forms? I mean, cost of candidates, what do we call nomination forms? That's about that. So I think it's still very much in line with some of the questions that I've just read now.
Yeah.
Let me take one more. Okay, this is a comment. So do INEC pay political parties? Because the last election in 2023, we have about 92 registered parties, and today more parties have applied to register with INEC. Who funds this registration, and what are their gains? The money parties make, are they accountable to anyone? So I think this is also a very valid question. Do INEC pay political parties? There is usually this notion that INEC pay political party. So is it the reason why a lot of parties are now coming up? And whether or not that's the reason, the question again is, who funds this registration? I mean, the party registration with INEC, and the money the parties make from selling forms and others, who are they accountable to anyone? Who are they accountable to? So we'd like you to take this set of questions, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those brilliant questions again. So the issue of independent candidacy. We've talked about evolution of political parties in Nigeria. At no time was, in fact, the facts of the matter, and when the Constituent Assembly was deliberating on political parties and the issue of independent candidacy, there were opinions for and against, because the idea was that you want to guarantee inclusivity, you want people to be involved in the affairs of the party. We have chosen that political parties should become the platform via which people compete for offices, which of course is the reason why what you have on the ballot is political parties and not the individuals. So it means that it is the political parties that compete in the elections. And so if the party has to sponsor you, and this is largely because we wanted to have a mechanism via which people are vetted, people are properly profiled, people are prepared, provided the needed orientation and understands the basics before they are elected or selected to represent the party at general elections. These were the reasons why we had the political parties. Imagine if you have independent candidates. So they first do not have a mechanism for accountability to anybody, in that they don't account to any political party. So first of all, it means that they have to report directly to INEC. INEC has to profile them. INEC has to vet them. INEC has to do, so all of that has to happen. It means you can have over 1 million persons coming out to contest for, the presidency, for example. But when you have political parties, it helps to prune down the number of persons that come for a particular position. So I guess these were some of the spirit behind the provision for political parties as a platform via which people can contest election, as against having independent candidacy. There have been agitations in the past, of course, led by a famous lawyer of blessed memory, Gani Faomi, on the issues of independent candidacy. But all of those have been knocked out, like I said, and largely because you want to have a mechanism for providing some sort of profiling for people who contest for political positions. Otherwise, the Independent National Electoral Commission can become overwhelmed by those responsibilities. Even as of today, a lot of people have talked about, in fact, the Justice Ways report talked about unbundling INEC the way it is, but we are yet to get to that point where INEC can be properly unbundled and, situated in a way that they're able to handle all of the issues that they have. And which is the reason why INEC is so much encumbered by some of the functions it performs today. So those were some of the arguments for and against independent candidacy. Again, like you said, yeah, it may be independent candidacy may knock off, some of the issues that we have in the political parties if, provided for in the Constitution. But if you look at the Constitution, the 1999 Constitution as amended, there is absolutely nothing about independent candidacy. So we can't even be talking about that today, except we want to propose that through a legislative process to have that included in the Constitution. So that already is dead on arrival. We don't have that, and we can't have anything to do with that. The issue of supremacy of the Constitution, supremacy of the party, I think I've talked about that earlier. And I said, one of the reasons why the parties do not exercise their supremacy is because of weak institutions. And I did cite examples that we've had very strong comments that some institutions of states that are actually supposed to be independent and provide checks to executive arbitrariness do not actually perform those functions. For instance, if you take the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, in fact, sometimes functions or acts as an appendage, because it just goes ahead to approve everything that the executive sends without necessarily scrutinizing what the executive branch, recommends. And if you look at what happened, I'll give you another example. So in case you're thinking that, this is just made up, let's take the River State issue, for instance, the issue of appointment of a sole administrator in River State. The Constitution requires that there shall be vote count, but there was never a vote count. The Constitution required a vote count by the National Assembly members for or against the appointment of that sole administrator, because the Constitution never contemplated a sole administrator. The Constitution says no part of the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be governed by any means other than as prescribed in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So having a sole administrator is a complete illegality. It's illegal. It's completely illegal. But what did the Senate do? Via a voice vote, gave approval or approved that action. Forgetting that in giving that voice vote, they also ceded their own powers to the executive, because the president said the actions, regulations that will be made by the sole administrator shall be approved by the Federal Executive Council, where the president sits in council as the head, and not the National Assembly, which is supposed to be the responsible branch of government to oversight such state of emergencies. But the appointment of a sole administrator was illegal. But then, of course, the Senate or the National Assembly acted as an appendage to the executive by tacitly approving that action. What did the judiciary do? Nothing. So that's exactly what we're talking about, weak institutions of state. And I did cite again that in the case of Labour Party, the Supreme Court made a declaration. In the case of PDP leadership tussle, the Supreme Court also made a determination to the effect that the tussle is a function of the party, and it is the party that has to address the issue. This is how you give party the supremacy to function. And I did also cite the case of Adogbe versus Obasanjo. For those who were around at the time, you recall that there was a mini scuffle between Obasanjo and the chairman of the party, Chief Adogbe, at the time, during the National Convention. It was a case of the chairman, exerting authority as the chairman of the party, and the president saying, "I'm the leader of the party." So this issue of leader of the party and the chairman of the party brings a lot of confusion and weakens or erodes the powers of the chairman of the party to function. So these are some of the things that actually puts a question on the supremacy of the party in matters that are strictly party related. The other question is, does INEC pay political? INEC does not pay political party. I did say that once upon a time, their stipends were given to political party as subventions by through the INEC, but that has stopped because we had lots and lots of parties that were springing up solely for purpose of assessing that funds, and then they will disappear. You never hear from them again, which of course led to the reason why INEC was deregistering a lot of the political parties, because they were considered to be more like non-governmental individuals or non-governmental families, as the case may be. So you have a political party, for instance, you have husband, mother, father, mother, and children as members of the party. So all of those have stopped. It has stopped a long time ago. So nobody fund, government does not fund political parties. The question as to who funds the registration of political party is the members of the political party that fund the registration of the political parties. Are political parties accountable and to the people? Yes, political parties are meant to be accountable to the people. This is the reason why there was a clamor for accountability on the part of political parties to account for campaign funds. I'm sure we all remember this. Not how many parties responded. I think it was only the Labour Party that made an attempt to give an account of the funds that they raised during the campaigns. Not many other parties did that. So political parties are accountable to the members of the party, but are the members demanding for accountability? Even as Nigerians, how often do we demand accountability from the government? So budget is prepared and passed and implemented. We never query the budget. How many times have we taken time to look at the budget, to scrutinize the budget? If you do sectoral analysis of the budget, you'll be amazed at the kinds of things that are in the budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That's how you are able to see spoons that are budgeted for every year. You see it there. You will see if you take, for instance, maybe Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs. Within the budget of the Ministry of Intergovernmental Affairs, you will find pit latrines, construction of pit latrines. What has pit latrines got to do with Ministry of Intergovernmental Affairs? So these are some things that as citizens, we have a responsibility to look at the budget of the Federation and be able to raise questions as to some anomalies in the budget. These are our monies have, filtered away from the country. So yes, parties are accountable to its member, but the question is, do members demand for accountability? That's a big question. Moderator, over to you.
All right, thank you so very much, sir. Thank you so much. So I will take a few more hand raises because our time has been fast spent, but then this is quite an interesting conversation. I'll take in no particular order. Please, I'll ask you to unmute Abiodun Adebeshi and Ibrahim Yusuf. I'll ask both of you to unmute and speak. So kindly accept the request to unmute so you can ask your question. So I'm sorry we won't be able to take the entire question. anymore because of time. But please, Ibrahim, Yusuf, and Abiodun Adebeshi, kindly unmute. I've asked you to unmute. Check your Zoom so you can unmute and speak. So while we're waiting for you to come up,
Good evening.
Want to sincerely
Good evening. Are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. My question is, why is the active participation of citizens in political parties essential for the sustenance of democracy in government? And also, how can there be inclusive in the political party, like person with disability and women? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's take also Mr. Ibrahim. So facilitator will answer the two. So your question is about us around how can we increase the participation of people in political parties and engagements? And more importantly, how can we achieve inclusivity? Talking about persons living with disabilities and some other persons who have been probably marginalized over time in the context of political party participation. Okay, so that's noted. Taiwo, okay, sorry, Ibrahim Yusuf. Kindly unmute. I've asked you to unmute. Okay, if we are not getting Ibrahim, Williams Adewale, kindly unmute. I've asked you to unmute. So perhaps I should just read one more question from the in-call messages. Someone said the major challenges facing political parties in Nigeria, such as internal party conflict, lack of internal democracy, and godfatherism. How do these issues affect democratic governance and political stability in the country? I believe there's a lot. So, Mr. Ivan, can we look at these two? And as we wrap up this session today, can we look at the two questions asked? How can we achieve inclusivity? And also, how can we address, how do the issue of internal issues in the parties, how do they affect national stability, political stability in the country? So, sir, let's take the two questions so we can wrap up.
Thank you very much. So in conclusion, let me speak first to inclusivity. You recall when I was talking about the structures of the party, there were provisions within the party guidelines that mandates the election of women, and there are also provisions that speak to youth involvement, but much more, there are also positions across some political parties. I'm aware there are provisions that favor inclusion of the disabled in the affairs of the political party. So, but the question is, how much of these opportunities do people take, and how much of these opportunities are people aware of? So these are some of the things. So you see, a lot of times the issue of inclusivity is also a function of the level of awareness that the citizens have, and which of course leads me to a very important question someone asked here. He said political parties are supposed to provide political education and create awareness. And this, of course, is what will eventually drive inclusivity. If people become aware, like the Electoral College is doing, which is a question this person is asking, that does Electoral College have plans to become a political party? This sounds very funny, but I kind of like the idea, because indeed the Electoral College is filling a huge gap that the political parties are supposed to be filling. They are not doing that, which is the reason I said earlier, the visionary saw this huge gap from his experience having been in political party leadership, from his experience being a senatorial candidate of a party, and decided to establish an institution that will provide political literacy. Now that people are becoming politically aware and politically literate, you can see people are becoming conscious and are joining political parties. So the more politeracy sessions that we have, the more we will have people becoming interested in joining political party. That's how you build inclusivity. Inclusivity is driven by knowledge. It is driven by enlightenment. The more people are enlightened, the more they want to participate in their democratic process. But get this, the price of freedom, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The price of freedom and liberty is eternal vigilance. So, if you want to be politically free, if you want to enjoy the freedom that the Constitution provides, the rights that the Constitution provides, then eternal vigilance is important. It means that what eternal vigilance is speaking to is that we must participate. We must be seen to be involved. We must be interested in the governance of this country, whether at the world level, whether at the local government level, whether at the national level. We must. There is a common cliche that politics is local. Very true. So that means we need to go back to the roots. Let's go back to the wards, to the local government. Let's start from there and monitor. Okay, even if you are not in your state, you are living in Abuja like I do, how much of involvement have we dedicated time to be part of the local government administration in where we live? Say if you are living in Amak, how involved are we? So this is what eternal vigilance is all about. We must be directly involved in the governance of our country. So inclusivity doesn't just happen. In fact, freedom, that I say, is not given. Freedom is not given. You have to fight for it. And it takes eternal vigilance to do that. So that's basically what that is about. Internal party conflict. Look, conflict is part of every system. Conflict is part of every system. You know why? I come from a background that is different from yours. The way I view things, the way I understand things is different from the way you see things and the way you understand things. Our worldviews are different. And as much as this is the case, there is bound to be conflict. Conflict of ideas. Even on a provision of the Constitution, we may have different opinion. This is usually what generates conflicts. And then you hear the arguments. People shouting on top of their voices, trying to make a point. But at the end of the day, when consensus is sought, everybody falls in line. And then understanding is availed. So this is the point. Conflict is important. I can't tell you you can have a system that is devoid of conflict. It's impossible. In fact, in many places, they tell you conflicts are barometers by which we measure whether we are making progress over an issue or not. Okay? So you will always have conflict, but then parties must evolve a mechanism for conflict resolutions. This is very important. And there are a lot of these processes. Does it affect political governance and stability? Of course it does. If you have a ruling party that is beset with crisis, it cannot govern. Look at what is going on in PDP today. If you have this kind of conflict, if a candidate emerges from PDP today, and you have this kind of conflict that is in PDP today, the president can't govern, because you need the party to be able to govern. You need the party members to be together. You need the party to be together to be able to govern. Even in APC, there is a ruling party. We cannot say that there is no trouble in the APC. There are crises in the APC. There are crises in the APC. There's been allegations of the parties not conducting certain meetings. Of course, it may be because of, fear of what could happen if such meetings are convened. So there is no party that doesn't have crisis. Look at Labour Party. There's been crisis here and there in the Labour Party. NNDP is not spared. Almost all the political parties have one issue or the other. So yes, they affect political governance, because when you have those crises, you spend so much time trying to douse the fire and you lose sight of governance issues. And when you lose sight of governance issues, what happens? Instability becomes the order of the day. Today, there is hardly a focus on governance. What is on the front burner today is politics, elections, 2027. Meanwhile, insecurity pervades the entire landscape. People are scared. People are scared. People are worried. Insurgency everywhere, terrorism here and there. And yet, the government is more interested in 2027. So these are big issues. What is the political party doing? There is, if you listen very well, you find that there are some cracks in the parties. So yes, lack of internal party democracy affects democratic governance and affects the stability of the country. It does. So this is very important, and that's why we are encouraging people to join political parties, contribute their ideas, and work to ensure that, we have stable political parties, we have viable political parties that can provide the options that Nigerians seek for. So thank you, and over to you, moderator. I think I've addressed all the questions, and if there are very pertinent questions that require my attention, of course, party chairman resignation. Yes, we had that in APC. You can find out what may have resulted in that happening. It's completely not devoid of some conflicts. So, like I said, conflicts are everywhere. All right, so over to you, moderator, and thank you all for your very wonderful opinion. I see some comments in the comment section, very, very interesting comments on the session. A lot of people have been conversing. In fact, it's been a very, very engaging session on the comment section. Kudos to all of you. I really commend you. And I love the fact that you are putting all of this. I'm sure, moderator and the Electoral College, Lisa, you have a system of curating some of these comments on the platform. They could form very important opinion or policy issues that the Electoral College might want to take up some day in the future. So thank you, everyone, and over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ebiang. Thank you so very much for taking your time to take us through this interesting conversation. Rest assured, even from the comments, we can already agree that a lot of people had a good time listening to your session. I mean, it's one of the very important and pertinent part of governance and politics that a lot of people have been looking forward to learning about. And I'm sure for many people, some of the doubts, concerns they have, the burning questions they have has been addressed. And it is all kudos to you. We sincerely appreciate you for the time you took, the effort you took in putting this together and sharing of also your experience in the process. So I want to say thank you to you, especially, sir, once again. And thank you to all the participants for joining today. Thank you to all the team at the Electoral College for doing this with us. It's really amazing to see all these efforts being put together from all angles to ensure we have a smooth running of this class today. Thank you so very much, everyone. Yeah, just like Mr. Ibiang said, my call to action for everyone would be, and I'm saying this from the standpoint of experience as well, let us begin to engage with the Nigerian budget. I put it to you that the 2025 budget, both for ZIP, that is Zonal Intervention Project, and ERGP, that is Economic Recovery Growth Plan budget, is out. And there are a lot of anomalies. So when we begin to speak up in our various quarters, at the CDA level, at the local government level, civil societies, government will begin to revisit some of the policies they make, some of the items in their budgets, and ensure that they do these things in accordance with the Constitution, and also to give account to the common people they serve. So I want to encourage everyone to please get a hold of the 2025 budget and see for yourself what is happening in your state, what is meant to happen in your local government and in your community. And so you can maybe perhaps keep up conversations with that. Thank you so much once again, Mr. Ibiang Libinius. Madam Lisa, thank you for staying true with us. Thank you for putting up all the back-end activities. Madam Lisa, is there any form of announcement?
Thank you very much, Tohib. That was great moderation. Thank you so much, Mr. Livinus. On behalf of the college, it's always a pleasure having you. It has been such an insightful session this evening. Thank you very, very much. I'm sure the students got a lot of value. I'll just allow them to all unmute and say thank you personally before I end the class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.